This is the S2G podcast. I'm Tanya Bakritzes. In this episode, we dive into how Urbint's disaster response technology is helping utilities stay resilient in the face of increasing risks and rising energy demands. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, nor should it be used to evaluate any investment or security. It is not directed at or intended for any current or prospective investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of capital. References to specific companies are for illustrative and educational purposes only and do not represent an endorsement or investment recommendation. S2G currently maintains an investment in Urbint, and S2G's investment is not open to additional investors. The views expressed by podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of S2G. For additional important information, please visit s2ginvestments.com/disclosures. Adaptation is on the radar for most sectors, but for utilities, it has become mission critical. In this The Pitch episode, Chuck Templeton sits down with Corey Capasso, founder and CEO of Urbint, and Bala Nagarajan, managing director at S2G, to discuss how Urbint is helping utilities adapt to an era of extreme weather, aging infrastructure, and increasing operational complexity. Urbint's AI-powered platform offers critical tools for damage prevention, storm response, and worker safety, three areas where utilities face growing risk and rising regulatory and public scrutiny. Chuck, Corey, and Bala discuss how Urbint built trust in a traditionally cautious sector, scaled a multi-product platform, and positioned itself as an essential partner in operational resilience. This episode offers a powerful case study in how adaptation-focused technologies are becoming indispensable to the bottom lines of entire industries and to the broader energy transition.
Corey, it's great to have you here today. I'd love it if you would just quickly introduce yourself and give us a brief description of Urbint.
My name is Corey Capasso, and I'm the founder and CEO of Urbint. Urbint's an AI-powered operational resilience company that enables energy and utility companies to protect the public, workers, assets, and the environment.
The problem.
As consumers, our daily quality of lives are dependent upon safe, affordable, and reliable power. If you look at the unfortunate amount of extreme weather events we've had, even going to the unfortunate events in Texas just about a week ago, severe weather events have increased in frequency, and they don't come without fatalities, unfortunately. So this is a huge issue that we need to do just for society alone. And obviously, as a utility, they've got regulatory mandates that they need to meet to be responsible financial operators. And between aging infrastructure and climate change, utilities are in the fight of their lives. A lot of utilities still operate control center, phones, whiteboards, spreadsheets. Some have internal or legacy systems. And usually those systems do one aspect of the restoration process. Our goal with Urbint was to create a solution that really was an end-to-end software solution that enabled them to not only understand the impact, but manage the entire storm restoration process all the way through rate recovery.
Yeah, and so the grid's getting older, but the workforce who's got to support all this is getting older as well. And so that's certainly a strain on just the whole system.
Yeah, obviously the grid is aging and there's $100 billion a year going into grid modernization, but also there is an aging workforce. It's projected to be about 45% turnover in the workforce over the next 5+ years. So there's also a shortage of labor as well, and it's specialty craft labor. So you put on extreme weather events combined with the aging grid, combined with workforce turnover, and also having to train newer folks that are coming on board. There's a lot to do at once, and it's a really complex challenge.
Chuck spoke with Bala, managing director on S2G's energy team, to discuss how he first came across Urbint and the critical challenges the company is working to solve.
Urbint is an investment that you have led and brought to the organization. And when did you first learn about Urbint, and what piqued your initial interest?
Urbint is pretty well known in the utility circles. And Chuck, as you may remember, I joined S2G from NextEra. NextEra owns Florida Power and Light, which is the largest electric utility in the States. So I come from the utility circles where Urbint is well known. Urbint raised capital from investors, including Energy Impact Partners, who have a long list of utility LPs, and from utilities directly, including National Grid and AEP. Got to track the team over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. and got particularly interested when they acquired a company which was providing storm response solutions for utilities.
Yeah, really, there's some macro issues that are affecting the grid. So, what are the macro challenges that they're facing?
The macro challenges in the utility sector are twofold. One, much of the electric grid in particular was built in the 1960s and 70s, and it was designed for centralized fossil-based generation, leading all the way down from pipes and wires into your home and my home. Whereas now we have an electricity grid that is potentially pushing power the other way around, which is you and I having rooftop solar panels, electric vehicles which have bidirectional charging and therefore pushing power back into the grid. And more importantly, the electric grid is also changing in terms of being reliant on centralized, dispatchable, fossil-based generation to a distributed, intermittent generation, which includes wind and solar. So that complexity of the grid means that the existing infrastructure is struggling to catch up with the needs of modern society, and hence increased investments are required to keep the grid resilient and robust. The second factor impacting the grid is weather events. We've seen weather events happen with more frequency, and as they happen with more frequency, increasingly with more intensity, causing damages in excess of $1 billion in each case when hurricanes hit power infrastructure. What that has resulted in is you have an aging infrastructure on one hand, more frequent weather events happening on the other hand, and a combination of that is that we're spending way more on keeping up our infrastructure, keeping lights on, and those costs are being passed back on to customers like you and me. So affordability is a concern. There is an impending need to invest in infrastructure, but that infrastructure eventually hits our bills, and regulators and stakeholders across North America and in fact across the world are struggling as to how to balance the need for spend versus keeping electricity bills low and affordable.
The solution.
And so you have three main products as part of your offering. And can you tell us a little bit about each of those?
So each solution we have is geared towards reducing operational risk for critical business programs. So we have three core solutions today. We have damage prevention, which is really to protect underground assets. Every single day, there's hundreds of thousands of excavation activities that could happen at any given point. And that can cause a gas explosion. It can cause a critical power outage. It can cause a fiber cut. It can cause a 911 center to go down. In the United States, Chuck, that's a $30 billion a year annual problem. And right now, the underground is an area where we have such less visibility into than above ground infrastructure. Storm response, which is another one of our core solutions, the entire goal of storm response really is to increase public safety by enabling utilities to restore power faster after a major weather event. And our third solution, worker safety, is to protect the workforce that's so critical to this energy transition by preventing serious injuries and fatalities amongst work, which has been really an issue that's persisted for over the last 15 years.
And so how do you start to work with knowing that a storm's going to come? You obviously can't prevent the storm, but what do you do? What do you help these utilities do in preparation for it?
So every utility obviously has a weather forecast, whether that's in-house or from an external provider. Before a storm happens, we want to enable the utilities to better understand the potential impact of the storm. What type of damage is going to happen as a result of the storm? We do that by using AI to translate a weather forecast into actionable intelligence to understand the potential magnitude and types of damage that are going to occur from a storm. If they know that, they could understand the types of resources that are going to be required to fix the damage faster, which gets power back on quicker. And on any large weather event, winning the first few hours can really change the outcome and overall restoration time of a major event. But then also, if they know where the damage is going to occur, they could pre-stage crews in those positions so that once the impact and storm occurs, those crews are closer to the site of damage, so they could restore faster. During a storm, which is the second part of our solution, it really enables the resource acquisition of third-party crews that come in from all sorts of different states and across different disciplines to help respond. When a utility has a major event, they have to go outside of their native workforce and pull in different crews and contractors. Just securing those alone historically has been done by phone. We enable them to take a process that could take hours down to minutes, and then we manage the entire resource aspect in the field.
And so, I mean, that's a critical thing, is being able to flex up, because obviously they can't have these people all in their payroll at the same time, because they don't need them all the time. They only need them when these sort of storms happen, and storms don't always happen in the same place, obviously. And so how do you help them manage this sort of flexing labor pool or set of professionals that are needed?
Yeah, so we have over 80% of the utility contractors that are essential to responding to storms in our system. So when a utility understands the potential impact of an event, they can come into our system and call out for external resources. This allows different contracting companies to respond to the utility that meet their criteria, and it allows the utility to essentially match and secure those resources. And that can be done, as I mentioned, in minutes. It also allows utilities to understand the mobilization cost of those different resources, because utility contractors are spread throughout the country. There's always a balancing act of what is the cost to mobilize and what is the distance of those contractors to make sure they can arrive in a quick enough timeline.
Product market fit.
And so we know that enterprise sales are hard to big organizations, but there's also a rumor that it's selling to utilities is also a challenge. So tell us a little bit about your approach and how do you partner with them and make it an easy choice for them?
It is a big challenge to sell software to utilities. So for us, we only focus on products that have very high impact, but also that your process enables a fast time to value with that quantifiable impact. Utilities are inundated with technology all day long. And there's actually a large initiative for IT consolidation within utilities. Because if they try to adopt everything at once, that's going to lead to a different set of challenges. So the key is to provide differentiated value, but understand how to partner with that utility so they could realize the value. That really is creating the proper framework, going from your first discovery all the way to your go live through the actual adoption of the technology and making sure that operational impact is realized. And I think one of the bigger challenges, Chuck, is with the field workforce. You've got thousands of workers out in the field. You can't take the traditional Silicon Valley approach of break things, fail fast. Rolling out and deploying software in the field to these critical workers that are already challenged with just their day jobs, that's something that can't be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And a failed deployment of field software is a huge opportunity cost for a utility. So I think when you're talking about deploying mission critical software that's in the field, used by field workers as part of their normal day-to-day, that's a much higher bar to clear than, say, something being adopted in the back office.
Bala shared how Urbint's solution was designed to address the most critical needs of their customers.
If you look at every listed utility's quarterly analyst presentation, they start with worker safety as their first slide. Is my crew coming back home? Is the number one license to operate for the utility, and more importantly for the CEO to survive
CEOs get fired if people get injured, right?
Exactly. So. And then the second is, have I operated my infrastructure at its highest efficiency with highest uptime for customers? Because the utility business model is going back to your regulators every 5 years saying, I want to spend X $billion more to upgrade my infrastructure, to build new generation capacity. And the regulators give you a consent for that on the basis of your past performance. And one of the key indicators of past performance is outage. And how long have your customers been out of power and how quickly have you responded to that are the two key metrics based on which many of these rate cases get decided. This is also one of the reasons that gave us conviction on Urbint, which is if you're a utility CEO, would you say no to investing more in your worker safety products and solutions? No. Would you say no to investing in some of the key metrics that determine the outcome of your next rate case with your regulators? Absolutely not. So that meant that we knew that this was not a vitamin pill, but it was a painkiller for utilities.
Yeah. And are all these products, are these sold once and then you never see them again? Are these ongoing maintenance agreements or these SaaS models? What's the right model for this? Again, because utilities, they are known for being cautious in how they spend money on software. They're mostly hardware people. Obviously, a lot more software is coming into the space than it's ever been. Probably most utilities don't have dedicated software engineers or programmers or whatever, so they are dependent on a lot of third-party capabilities and or spreadsheets and whatnot that we can all do, all us non-softwares do all the time. But do they get comfortable, or how do they think about bringing these products into their organizations?
When we looked at what is the competitive landscape for Urbint, to your earlier point, Chuck, we saw that most of these were in-house solutions that were either built by a small skunkworks team inside a large utility or done through inefficient processes like spreadsheets. What that meant was in the first demo that a utility would take from Urbint, they were like, wow, we didn't know these kinds of solutions existed. And if they existed, how quickly can we adopt them? And that's when Urbint points towards, hey, don't worry, someone else in your organization already uses 3 of our different products. Why don't you give them a call and find out how this works out? In addition, Urbint and the utilities tend to do this on multi-year cycles in terms of there is a certain amount of customization that's involved in helping the utility adopt the products or solutions that is best fit for them. And as a consequence, typically contracts from Urbint are multi-year recurring revenue contracts. So as you can imagine, to make this product and solution best fit for the customer, best fit for the utility, there is a certain element of data that you need from the utility, which is typically where most startups fail because the utilities are not giving you that data. Once you've crossed that threshold, then the speed with which you're able to ingest that utility and provide feedback back on what they've done, typically they go through a period of backtesting to make sure what you're telling them is actually true, and they want to make sure the false positives, false negatives are in line. And Urbint has been able to do that most effectively because of their track record of working with utilities over this many number of years. But the fact that they have someone like National Grid, Southern, as key customers means that it's much easier for Urbint to convince the utility number 11 to utility 500 to say, hey, why should we adopt your product versus going with an incumbent solution that our tech team thinks they can produce.
Go-to-market strategy.
And so, Corey, how did you get your first few customers? Because obviously there's a lot of risk in working with a smaller startup when you're super young, just getting off the ground, but being able to sell to these utilities. How did you build trust with them? How'd you work through that?
So I think the first and most important thing was always focusing on impact and solving critical problems that were top of mind and weren't being solved internally or with existing partners. Secondly, it's finding the early adopters, the folks that are open to trying out new technologies and partnering with a less mature organization at that time. And then third, it's always on how you structure the working relationship. Our goal is to always show a quantifiable impact tied to the operational outcome that the utility is seeking. And I think it's important to align all 3 of those things. In the case of our first 2 customers, they were very large utilities that had unfortunately had 2 major catastrophic events that resulted not only in loss of life, but also in hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of fines. So clearly there was a real problem. There was also internal pressure and regulatory scrutiny, as well as public pressure to stop those types of incidents from happening. So again, focusing on a major issue that they have to solve, that gives you sort of the entryway to partner with an organization if you have that unique of a value proposition.
And can you share any of your customers that you work with today and who some of those early customers were?
So today we work with about 30 major utilities across the country. We work with Exelon, the National Grid, Southern Company, Dominion. We tend to work with the larger utilities across the country, but we're also starting to work with co-ops and some municipalities as well.
That's great. And why just the large guys? Because it seems like something where if you can pre-stage teams as these storms are going on and relocate them during storms as needed, it just seems like everyone could take advantage of that.
So the problem is equally important across small, medium, and large size utilities. But with the large utilities, it's just a more complex and larger issue given the populations that they serve. So we believe we could have a larger impact on the entire country by working with the larger IOUs, but also they're at the point where they've invested enough in people and process, and technology is really the last unlock they could have to help solve the problem. With some of these smaller mid-sized utilities, they're still in the process of maximizing what they could do on people and process. And then thirdly, our product was built to be more configurable for larger enterprises. There is some product adaptation required to service the mid and low end of the utility market, which is what we're in the process of doing.
Bala spoke about the factors that have enabled Urbint to successfully scale and even begin moving into other industries beyond power companies.
So not every company is adopting all three of these technologies at once or software systems at once. How are you seeing the uptake of these software, these different packages? And is it a land and expand with most of these? What's the methodology of uptake you're seeing?
I think being a single product offering to a utility, which is therefore exposes you to a long sales cycle, you're not helping yourselves to succeed because you're then subject to the long sales cycles of a single product inside a single champion in a large enterprise. Urbint has 3 different products, and within those 3 products have multiple different product suites, which gives the utility customer the option to adopt different products and solutions depending on their needs and wants and budget constraints. And more importantly, what we've seen and what we liked about Urbint was the fact that once they had a customer adopting one of their products, they've already passed through cybersecurity clearance. They already have the goodwill of the key champions internally. So their ability to get from one end of the organization to the other end of the organization is much quicker, faster, which means that their sales cycles have been shorter and the uptick has been faster.
You're discovering other industries besides power, right? In what you're saying, what else are you seeing? Where else does this work?
As you can imagine, industries including oil and gas and telecom send crews out.
They have worker safety,
exactly.
Right?
So they're sending them out every single day to fix things that are going wrong in any infrastructure that's buried under our ground. Those are the 2 key sort of adjacent verticals where the worker safety product has seen much traction today. Damage prevention is a product that is being used increasingly by water utilities, by cities, because if there is a puncture in one of your water lines, just to go back and fix that, you need approval from the nearby fiber cable line and the utility line, and the city needs to consent that. So many cities are saying if a utility is using Urbint and my telecom operator is using Urbint, I should be using Urbint as well to make sure that we're all coordinated in our response of any events like this. So it's purely through word of mouth and through sort of customer success cases that Urbint has been able to move into those adjacent sort of verticals.
The impact.
And so what are some of the measurable impacts you've had so far with these customers that you've got?
Yeah, so the key things that we want to measure, Chuck, are the leading indicators of the operational impacts that we're trying to drive towards. So, for example, for worker safety, we're trying to prevent serious injuries and fatalities from happening on the job. We want to be able to increase hazard recognition at the point of work, but at the same time, make sure the appropriate safety controls are implemented before work begins. Those are 2 core metrics we work at. With damage prevention, which could lead to a third-party damage, we want to understand how many high-risk excavation activities were intervened on by the utility before excavation work began. On storm response, we want to understand how much time we saved on resource acquisition, how many resources that we were able to pre-stage, but also on average, what we thought the efficiency was on restoring power.
And then how do you track and then communicate that back to your customers? How do you track what you're seeing and all that?
So a critical part of the application is the insights and reporting. And the main user is the field worker that's out there doing the work. But we also have other stakeholders that use the product, such as supervisors and directors of safety and directors of operations. And all the intelligence across thousands of work orders happening in the field every single day is captured, and we're running insights on top of that to surface that to the appropriate stakeholders so that they could better enable the program for more safe work going forward. And what do I mean by that is if they understand at a very granular level where their biggest exposures are to risk for their workers, they could invest in better safety training. They could reprioritize work. They could make certain crew sizes bigger. So it allows them to, aside from us mitigating the risk in real time, it allows the utility to make longer term investments in their operational workforce that could lead to safer outcomes.
And a lot of what you're doing is actually, it's not necessarily climate mitigation, but it's climate adaptation for a lot of these utilities and municipalities that they're in. And so how do you intend to be that resiliency partner and see yourself growing with industry?
So our North Star has always been resiliency and focusing on our mission and having a quantifiable impact. So I think most importantly, any product that we release or deploy with a customer has to drive the operational outcomes tied to resiliency, saving lives, protecting assets and workers, protecting the public and the environment. I think for us, the key is having fewer but higher impact products. And what we've shown to these utilities is that we can continuously innovate across multiple core operational programs. So some of the largest utilities in the country today are using multiple Urbint solutions. We've not only become a trusted partner for one problem set, but really a trusted partner to the enterprise. And the fact that we could be a strategic partner to them in resiliency, which is existentially imperative for their business.
Yeah, because I'm out here in California. We've had our issues with some of our utilities getting beat up in the press for not being as resilient as they potentially could have.
Yeah, I think during these major events, the first thing everyone looks at is why did this happen and could more have been done? And I think especially with events that are a result of extreme weather events, the unfortunate reality is things are going to happen. The key, though, for utility is to have an existing process in place that is adequate to mitigate and respond to those type of events. And I think that's what the public and the regulators expect. Everyone understands that things are going to happen, but having the adequate investment ahead of time to do the best possible job to mitigate it is what's important.
In the venture world and in the investment community out here, we talk about painkillers and vitamins. And so painkillers are something that solves a problem immediately. And a vitamin is something that potentially makes you better for the future, an indeterminate time out there. But recently, there's been some events or storms that have showed that this is really a painkiller and not a vitamin. Is there maybe a little case study that you can share about how these companies have changed the way they address or taken a different stance than they used to in the past?
So I think one utility that has been quite vocal about their overall response and mitigation plans in the wake of a major incident is CenterPoint. Right. Last year, they had Hurricane Beryl, which had several million people without power for an extended period of time. And since then, they've essentially done a technology blitz where they've partnered with a handful of technology companies, Urbint being one of them, to really put them in the best possible position to mitigate all the different types of threats and challenges that they have from extreme weather events. Not only did they do that in record timing with alignment from the board and the executives, they also integrated the solutions in a way that harmonized all these different technology companies to really do the best possible job at protecting the communities that they serve.
Chuck spoke to Bala about how Urbint fits into S2G's focus on adaptation.
And so everyone in the industry talks about there's two aspects to climate. One is certainly mitigation. How do we reduce the amount of storms that are happening by GHG reductions and other things like that? But then there's also this adaptation piece, which gets a lot less attention. Tell us what adaptation is and tell us, why this aligns with an adaptation thesis.
Yeah, Parag Khanna at our summit talked about how adaptation is a geographic arbitrage of people and capital relocating to future fit regions. While that might be the best end state for us as society, in the near to midterm, people are still going to live in Florida and Texas, which seems to be at the brunt of many extreme weather events. Utilities can't just pick up their poles and wires and go and serve customers in a different part of the world. So what that means is I think the onus is on us to enable incumbents, enable people who live in these weather-hit, weather-prone regions to survive and in fact thrive. And I think that's an example of what Urbint does, which is helping the utilities face up to these challenges and solve these challenges in a much more efficient and effective way. And these problems, frankly speaking, didn't exist 5-10 years ago. And many people say, why didn't utilities prepare for this before? I don't think there were 2 Category 5 storms in many decades before it happened 2 years ago. So the intensity and the frequency with which extreme weather events are happening means that we need to find solutions today, then aspire for a end state where people can relocate capital and livelihoods to future fit regions. What is increasingly evident for us is that we think the extreme weather events and the difficulty in predicting the intensity of these extreme weather events means that customers, whether it's residential customers, utilities, large B2B customers, they all have to prepare in terms of how to adapt to these circumstances. and be more resilient to the outcomes that in large cases are outside of their control. Maybe I'll refer back to what happened in 2024 with Hurricane Milton. Hurricane Milton hit Florida in September, October of last year. The storm on a Saturday, early October, was ranked tropical depression, which is the lowest rank of a hurricane. And within 3 days went from tropical depression to category 5. The reason I bring up Hurricane Milton in the context of adaptation is, imagine if you're a utility CEO and a storm that you thought was a tropical depression on a Saturday morning is suddenly a category 5 storm on a Tuesday. You need to adapt, you need to respond, you need to move things fairly quickly. It's very hard to blame a utility for why a hurricane happened in their sort of utility territory, but what they are getting pulled up and held responsible for is, how well did you prepare for this? Did you know the storm was coming? Were you able to prepare in terms of get the right number of crews staged in the right location so that you could respond to the events thereafter? And the utilities are being tracked on how quickly did they get power back post an emergency event. That's a key metric for the utility when they go back to the regulators to say, I've done my job well, and therefore I need to get compensated when I think about my next 5-year cycle of capital deployment. So these are the 3 products that Urbint offers, which have very high resonance with the importance of what a utility does on a day-to-day basis. So the thesis around the age of adaptation, which was the summit thesis for us, is very relevant in Urbint's case, which is we're empowering an incumbent who has a very important role to play here to do a better job through tools and services and products and solutions that a company like Urbint provides.
What's next?
So you've got these 3 great products. You're selling utilities large and moving into the medium size across the U.S. What's next for you?
So we are beginning our international expansion. We are going to announce in the coming months our first large international customer, which we're really excited about. The bulk of our business today is in North America, but the problems we're solving across aging infrastructure and extreme weather, those are global issues. So we're really excited to take the impact of our technology across the world.
So what other future do you see for Urbint? Where do you see it going and what's next for it at this point?
I'm obviously speaking my book, but we're incredibly excited about Urbint and the future prospects for Urbint, in particular around owning the resiliency software stack for utilities. This includes, as a utility, if you think about how do I make my infrastructure more resilient, you would be thinking about climate modeling risk. And once you've done the modeling risk, then how do I harden my infrastructure? Once I've hardened my infrastructure, how do I know what is the risk of potential new threats coming and impacting my infrastructure? And then once I know a risk is actually coming, in this case, a Cat 5 storm, how do I prepare and respond to the storm soon after? And more importantly, how do I do predictive resiliency measures, like particularly around vegetation management? If I know a storm is coming, most of the time, the reason power goes out is because you have trees falling on poles and wires. So if you're able to go and proactively cut down on trees ahead of storms, that means the risk of that tree falling on your poles and wires is much lower, which means you're needing to have crews and needing to deal with power outages is much lower. So we want Urbint to eventually become the go-to partner for utilities around all things related to resiliency, and they're already doing that from worker safety, damage prevention to storm response. We see some adjacent opportunities for Urbint to expand in the resiliency stack.
The pitch.
And so what is your 1 to 3 sentence pitch to utilities as to why they should adopt Urbint's platform?
Every utility wants to protect their workers. They want to get power back on faster after a storm. They want to have fewer explosions and fewer critical power outages. I think it's created a very unique value proposition in that we know how to combine industry science with AI, with operational workflows and field usability that could actually drive the operational impact that they're looking for. And we've proven we could do that with some of the largest utilities in the world. And I think the combination of our experience with what we've been able to prove really speaks volumes to the type of partner we are.
Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2ginvestments.com.